In this video tutorial, I am going to teach you how I created the Allegra sterling silver spoon bowl ring. This video tutorial contains instruction on etching into sterling silver. This instruction does not work on silver-plated silverware. We have 30 images that are brand new and exclusively designed to fit on spoon bowls. They are available for purchase and download on our website. Be sure to print your images out on laser printer, which has been set to the darkest setting, and for glossy paper. Inkjet printers will not work. So you're going to cut out your desired image. You're going to need some steel wool, a spoon, paper towels, some Gorilla or duct tape, and you're going to need ferric nitrate. We have a link to that product from Amazon. You're going to need to use some alcohol, a hot plate, and a glass bowl or dish. You're going to use 3 parts water to 1 part ferric nitrate. So if you're going to use 1.5 cups of water, you're going to use 1/2 cup of ferric nitrate. It will just depend on the size of your container. For my container, I put in 3 1/3 cups of water and 1 1/3 cup of ferric nitrate. Be sure to put your ferric nitrate into the water. Never put water into the ferric nitrate. Stir until it is dissolved, and then set it on your hot plate on low. Mine has 5 settings, and I have it set on number 1. I did set it up to number 2 in order to transfer the image. You're going to clean your spoon bowl with some 000 steel wool. And then you're going to follow that up by wiping everything down with some alcohol. It doesn't matter whether it's denatured or isopropyl. You can also use acetone. You want to be sure that after you've cleaned your spoon bowl that you don't get any more fingerprints on it, as that can interfere with the transfer of your image and the final etch. I'm trimming away all the excess paper, mainly so I can be certain that I have my image centered on my spoon bowl. So I'm going to lay it in the spoon bowl and line it up. Then I'm going to set it on the hot plate. Sterling heats up very quickly. Just want to hold it there for a moment. The reason we're using laser toner is because it contains a plastic, and it's that plastic in the print that transfers onto the spoon bowl, and that becomes the resist. The acid is resisted by the black in the image. You're going to burnish it on to the back of the spoon bowl for at least a minute. When you take it off, it's going to be very hot. You can get it to cool down quicker by putting it on a steel bench block, but you do want to remove the backing before it gets cool. If it gets too cool, it becomes difficult to remove the backing. Just warm it up again so the backing comes off easier. If any spots didn't come out right, you could always touch them up with a fine Sharpie marker. Now I'm going to get 1 long strip of this Gorilla tape and 1 additional strip that I'm going to press onto the back of the spoon bowl. Then I'm going to trim away the excess. And it's really just so that it fits better into my bowl. Now I'm taking a fat Sharpie marker and I am coloring all around the outer edge of the spoon bowl. And the reason for that is if you do not protect the edge of the spoon bowl, you're going to get pitting. And if you're cutting your design out of the spoon bowl, it's really not that important. But if you're going to use the entire spoon bowl as part of your project and your design, you don't want any pitting on the edges. Trim off any more excess. Now I'm going to put that long strip on the back, and then I'm going to submerge the piece into the ferric nitrate. You don't want your piece to touch the glass. You want it just to be suspended in the solution. I've turned it back down to 1, just lightly covered it with a lid, and set the timer for 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, I didn't feel like it was quite ready to come out yet, so I let it go another 10 minutes. And you can check by blotting and using your fingernail and seeing how deep your etch is. If your spoon bowl is not very thick, you're not going to want to get a deep etch, or you may etch right through the spoon bowl. I changed my mind on the design for this ring, so you'll see that the pattern that I am tracing around right now is different than the one that I etched. And I'm putting a line around the outside of this pattern because it's easier for me to see when I cut it out with the jeweler's saw. I've taken into consideration the thickness of my material and the desired ring size, and I am measuring out and marking where I'm going to cut. Using my jeweler's saw, I'm going to cut this out of the spoon bowl. Use a little bit of beeswax on your blade and it makes cutting easier. It also prolongs the life of your blade. Now I'm using some 220 grit sandpaper strips and files, and what I'm doing is removing any excess material that wasn't cut away during the sawing. And you want to take some time with this just to be sure that you get it really nice and smooth on the edges. I find it easier to get the edges dressed when the piece is flat as opposed to when the ring has been formed. So I find that if I just take my time and get it right when it is flat, that I feel like I'm much better off and can really focus my attention on the ring itself rather than the finishing of the edges. So just going back and forth with sandpaper, with different files, needle files, my half-round ring file, which is one of my favorite files. And just removing any material that is outside the line of the pattern itself. I'm taking it to the bench buffer and I am polishing it with white compound. Etching is part science and part art, and it is not uncommon to get pitting in the etch itself, and buffing it can help soften that look. Got my concho and I am sanding the back of it. Since it's a stamped piece, it can have rough edges. And so I want to go ahead and get that nice and smooth so it sits flat against the ring shank. I'm pounding it flat and then going to lay it on my piece and determine the orientation of the concho for my ring design. I often have no plan when I'm making a piece, so I just kind of wing it and make choices as I go. I'm marking where I'm going to make some divots in the metal, and that's where I'm going to attach some little sterling balls that I make. I'm using the smallest punch from a dapping set to make these little indents, and they just allow the little balls to sit down and keeps them from moving around a lot during soldering. I've moved on to sweat soldering. We're putting on some hard solder and hit it with a Mighty Flux first. Put your hard solder on, torch it until it just melts. Place it on the ring shank. I'm going to go ahead and get that centered in there. Now I'm going to add the little silver balls, and on each little silver ball on the bottom I've got a little bit of paste, soft paste solder. And the paste solder has flux mixed in it, and it's really nice for these little components. If you want to learn how to make the little silver balls, check the video that we put out just before this one, and there is a section that shows how to make the silver balls from .999 fine silver wire. I'm going to hit it with just another dash of Mighty Flux. Even though there is flux in the paste solder, there's no harm in adding just a dab more. Once everything is lined up, then we're going to fire up the torch and we're going to heat the entire piece. We want to be careful not to put a lot of heat on the concho. The concho is a thin and delicate piece of silver and is very easy to torch it, fry it, melt it. So you want to be careful not to put your flame directly on the concho. Rather, you want to keep your flame on the main portion and that is the ring shank. If the little balls move, just use your solder pick and tap them into place. Going to quench and pickle that. Bring it out, hit it with the brass brush. I brass brush pretty much after every step. It just lets me see more clearly where I am and if there's anything that needs to be done before I move on. And on this one, I just needed to touch up those edges a little bit with some more sandpaper. I don't always attach components to a ring shank prior to bending. In the case where I have more components that are flat, that I know are not going to get damaged in bending, I'll go ahead and put them on flat and then bend. If it's something like a thick 3D butterfly that would get crushed, I would not put that on prior to bending. So the ring's been bent, the ends are touching flush, and I've got medium solder on here and heating the entire piece. And when the piece comes up to temperature, the solder flows. Cool it down for a moment on the steel block, quench and pickle. And now I'm putting it on a steel ring mandrel and going to bring it into shape. Make sure to turn the ring over a couple of times. Since the mandrel is tapered, you want to make sure that you're rounding it out evenly. If there's a chance you lose a little ball, just stop, solder it back on, and keep going. Brass brushing again to check my progress. And now I am using my half-round ring file to remove the excess solder and to blend that line so you no longer see where it was soldered closed. The goal in soldering is to keep anyone from ever knowing that there was a joint there. So you want to remove any excess solder. And in sterling, it's a beautiful thing because you don't have to worry about silver plating getting damaged. You can be aggressive, as aggressive as necessary to blend in solder lines and remove excess solder and never have to worry about showing any base metal. And using an abrasive rubber disc on my rotary tool, and that also is to blend in that solder line, and working on the inside as well as the outside, and don't forget the edges. One thing to note is the ring designs that I have created are not necessarily one size fits all. These are pretty chunky rings, and if you find that the shank is too wide and you're unable to bend your finger, you're going to want to taper that back out. Try it on, see how it fits, see how it feels. If there's any material that needs to be removed on the back in order to make it more comfortable, then by all means go ahead and do that. You may want to start out by making a paper version and wrapping that and closing it with a piece of tape, putting that on your finger and seeing how that feels, and then adjusting your pattern and your ring design to match up with your personal needs. And spraying with some Mighty Flux. So we've used hard solder on the concho, medium on the band. Now we're going to put extra easy on the bezel cup. And the reason we're doing that is because the paste solder is easy. So we're going to go down one more step to extra easy. Heat that bezel cup just until the solder flows. Place it on the ring. The ring is being held with a third hand. And heating the entire ring. And because we are using extra easy, this is going to flow pretty quickly. Again, keep your flame away from the concho and the balls and the bezel cup and focus it mainly on the bulk of the ring, which is the shank. Once the solder is flowed, put it on your steel block, let it cool down a bit, quench and pickle. Now I'm using some white compound and polishing the ring. When you have all these little components on the front and you have a little delicate bezel cup, it's more appropriate to do some polishing by hand with a rotary tool as opposed to doing it with the bench buffer. Since the bench buffer is a large and much more powerful machine, it can damage the components, especially that bezel cup. So stick with hand polishing at this point. If you're going to do any tumbling, you want to go ahead and do it at this point prior to setting the stone. Once the stone is set, you do not want to put it in the tumbler. So fitting our cabochon in there. I love these turquoise cabochons. They have copper veining in them, and they are a great complement to the copper bezel cup. So using the prong pusher, we're pushing the prongs up against the cabochon, north, south, then east and west. Once the stone is held, then we're going to fill in all the way around and follow that up with the burnisher. And the burnisher is pressing those prongs right snug up against the stone. And that's what's holding it in place. Never use glue. Glue is a dirty word in silversmithing. Gorgeous. I chose not to put any patina on this ring, but I did want to share with you patina. So I'm going to do that with a different ring. That was made using a lot of the same techniques that I just showed you. So I have 3 cups of water here. The first one has hot water, second one has cool water, third one has cool water, to which I have just added a big scoop of baking soda. So we're going to be using liver of sulfur as our patina. I'm going to put a squirt of that into a hot water and mix that up. And we're going to plop the ring in there. This ring has an owl as its main focal point, an owl head. So I'm dipping it in the cool water, stops the process, lets me look and see if I have it dark enough. If it's not dark enough, I can put it back in the patina, let it sit a little longer. You can always brush the liver of sulfur directly on your pieces. Especially good for when you want to put patina just in particular areas rather than everywhere. Brushing is a great way to be able to do that. So I'm going to just let it sit a little bit longer and develop a little bit darker. And you can leave it in as long as you want to get as dark as you want. Once it's achieved the depth of color that you want, you're going to rinse it off in the baking soda water, and that's going to stop the darkening process. Now comes the brass brush, and we're going to do some removal of the excess patina that is on the high spots. The goal is to make the high spots shiny while keeping the recessed areas dark. And I'm using a buff on my rotary tool with white compound and shining up the ring. It's removing a little bit more of the patina. Sometimes I don't really know exactly how much patina I want to remove, and I kind of just play with different things. And if I've removed too much, well, then I just clean it off. Soap and water, put it back in the pickle for a minute, make sure it's all nice and clean, and then re-patina it, and then go back to removing any excess patina. So I put it on the ring mandrel. Sometimes it's just a little bit easier to control. Well, I've decided to take a little more patina off, so I've got the brass brush on my rotary tool, and I'm removing even more of the patina. And I'm really liking what I see here because it still gives me great depth. The patina is staying down in the crevices, and I have a nice bright shiny raised surface. And the abrasive buff to touch up. The abrasive buff is also my choice for doing the interior of the rings. Got to open that up a little bit to get the buff in. These little adjustable rings, these little open spoon bowl rings are great because they fit just so many different size fingers. And just continue to work around until it looks suitable. Absolutely beautiful. If you have any questions, please be sure to post them, and I'll do my best to answer them.